and gentlemen, thank you for watching the John Woodard Show.
My style is to not be here and analyze the news. Mine is to get out and talk to people in the news. When we tell people something that we know it to be truthful to the best extent possible, finding out what's really going on at the point where it all begins. There's so much in politics that people just don't talk about. I want to get out there and find out.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is John Woodard with the John Woodard Show, interviewing Paul Vallone, the head of NC Grassroots North Carolina, a Second Amendment advocacy group. Paul, thank you for being with us this morning. Tell me you were telling me off camera about your past background as an airline pilot. So how did you get involved in the Second Amendment issues?
Well, back in 1994, I actually watched then Speaker, I think it was Tom Foley, keep time open during the debate over the so-called assault weapon ban, even after time had expired, in order to buy enough votes to pass the ban. So, suitably outraged, I started calling around for any group that was conducting rallies to support the Second Amendment, because at that point in time, I still believed rallies were an effective political instrument. I know better now. But anyways, I found a group in Ohio calling themselves the Committee of 1776. And they said, yes, we're holding rallies in state capitals across the 4th of July weekend, 1994, leading up to the national rally in Washington. And I said, that's fantastic. That's only 30 days out. I said, who's organizing the rally in North Carolina? And they said, you are. So
that'll teach you.
Yeah, I thought about it. But after all was said and done, three guys without common use of the internet at that point in time put 1,000 people on the Capitol steps in Raleigh on July 2nd of 1994. We had the wherewithal to take names and create a mailing list out of that, and built Grassroots North Carolina as the state's primary gun rights organization since then. We incorporated Grassroots North Carolina as a 501c4. We also have an educational and legal action arm, Rights Watch International, and two political action committees, GRNC Political Victory Fund and the Judicial Fairness Project. The bottom line is that we are a pro-Constitution organization with a primary focus on the right to keep and bear arms. We are all volunteer, meaning that every dime we get goes toward grassroots activism. We don't pay Wayne LaPierre $1.1 million a year. So.
Well, this has been going on now for several years, do you have other people in North Carolina that are associated with your group, either directly or indirectly?
I mean, absolutely. We've got about, we're a membership organization, by the way. People can join by going to grnc.org, like Grassroots North Carolina, grnc.org. We've got about 20,000 members, but we make a point of distributing information beyond the core constituency of our supporters in order to maximize our input on the legislative process. So we have an email alert network of about 127,000 people in the state. And what we do is we apply intense grassroots pressure to particular legislators, committees, or in some cases, corporations. As the late Senator Everett Dirksen put it, when they feel the heat, they see the light. It works. That's what we do.
Absolutely. And in politics, money talks. And how it's almost a corrupt system. But
that's true to a certain extent. But when you get an all volunteer organization like ours, where there is no money trail, then legislators have no means of controlling you. And if you want something that truly scares them, that's it.
Well, this is this is a big issue. It continues to be a big issue in Democratic politics. It's hard to imagine how people think that it's okay for criminals to have guns, but law-abiding citizens shouldn't be able to defend themselves.
Well, we can discuss at length another time, but I would argue that what the American left is doing right now is actually a deliberate attempt to destroy traditional American values and traditional American society in order, this is straight Saul Alinsky rules for radical stuff. And what they're trying to do is to destroy the existing society so they can recreate it as the great socialist utopia they have so long envisioned.
Oh yeah, the Great Reset is alive and well. And not to get off subject here a little bit, but hell, just the other morning, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau says, we've learned a lot about this, how to do things with this virus, and we've learned how to, to use that rationale to push other social change issues that we're interested in.
Yeah, we'll save that topic for another day. We could write volumes on that one.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you and Mark Robinson put a bill together that went before the legislature. Tell me about that.
Well, House Bill 398 was introduced by Representative Jave Adams out of Catawba County. Its main advocate in the Senate was Chuck Edwards, and Senator Chuck Edwards. And House Bill 398 repeals North Carolina's pistol purchase permit system. What most people don't know about that purchase system is that it was originally a Jim Crow law. It was passed in 1919, a year after Missouri passed it, which was a year after race riots in St. Louis. The objective, basically, it allows the sheriff to deny anyone he wants a gun purchase, a handgun purchase, under the premise that they are not of, quote, good moral character, whatever that means. In 1919, good moral character meant that they weren't black. Okay. But to this day, sheriffs have been abusing this system, not only to deny firearms to minorities, but also to obstruct the purchase of handguns in other ways. For example, we have had to file 3 lawsuits against sheriffs to get them to issue pistol purchase permits as required by North Carolina law within 14 days, which is what the statute requires. But we've had to sue Gerald Baker out of Wake County twice. First, when he decided he was going to stop issuing pistol purchase permits altogether during the early COVID days, claiming COVID is his rationale, and later when he began to just slow walk all of the permits. He's now under a consent order and has paid damages and a settlement to us and to the plaintiff we recruited, and he is apparently now issuing permits on a more or less timely basis. But we've still had problems with Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden, and we recently had to file litigation against him. We have some of these anti-ICE left-leaning sheriffs, all elected in 2018, who are doing their dead level best to keep law-abiding citizens from being able to buy handguns. So we wanted to repeal the purchase permit system, which would basically, and by the way, in North Carolina, you cannot legally buy a handgun without either a purchase permit or a concealed handgun permit, one of the two. And so all of the people that were blocked by these sheriffs were effectively prohibited from protecting themselves. New gun owners have been mobbing gun stores around the country because of the civil unrest, the riots, the defund police movement, and all of it. But in these counties that they've been utterly unable to get handguns for self-protection. And so we want to repeal that purchase permit system. It's a Jim Crow law. It's even today it's being used to obstruct, handgun purchases. And by the way, the North Carolina Law Review, as we noted in the op-ed, North Carolina Law Review found that even today, minorities are being denied permits in Wake County 3 times more often than white applicants. And so by repealing this purchase permit system, we would have background checks for gun purchases done at the time of sale from dealers via the FBI's computerized National Instant Background Check System, as opposed to using these archaic slips of paper that are issued and good for 5 years. We actually had years back an earlier time we tried to repeal it unsuccessfully. We had the sheriff of the Charlotte Observer note that a number of people had gotten these permits, then committed felonies that made them ineligible to buy handguns, but continued to retain the permits, which could be used to bypass the computerized background check system. So if we repeal this permit system, background checks would be done at the time of sale rather than up to 5 years earlier under our present system. So this is a winner for everybody, except, of course, Roy Cooper, who's never met a gun he wouldn't ban. So
what was his rationale? I mean, he doesn't usually explain himself. Did he explain himself in this issue, in this situation?
Basically, that we should have that legislators should be working to strengthen universal background checks rather than weakening them at the time of exploding gun violence across the country. Of course, what he didn't bother to say was that his own party is the one driving that increase in violence across the country, thanks to the defund police movement and the other, the violent riots and the George Floyd motivated civil unrest. And so these mostly peaceful protests and the resulting crime are what are driving a spike in homicide in urban areas. So Roy Cooper, basically, his party increases violence and then blames lawful gun owners for that violence. That's their MO.
Well, the Democratic Party has always been pro removal of Jim Crow era rules and regulations and laws and everything. Just the other day, they were talking about that. Where doesn't he recognize the inconsistency in between his position and that of his party?
Never forget that the Jim Crow laws that the Democrats are currently claiming they want to repeal are the Jim Crow laws that they passed in the early 20th century.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Democrat laws. So what we are demonstrating today, because we have a number of Democrats, including Senator Natasha Marcus, who has spoken out very loudly against this bill. We have a number of Democrats who understand it's a Jim Crow law, but don't want to repeal it anyway. The bottom line is that they are anti-racism only when it suits their political agenda, generally when it's used to silence you and me. But they really don't care about racism. They care about power. That's really what it's all about.
Well, that's true in a number of different areas, such as those we were just talking about a moment ago. How are you've got a substantial following in the legislature. Who are your friends up there?
I would say Representative Jay Adams, without a doubt. I mean, Jay has been a tremendous help to us. In the House, we've always been very fond of Representative Larry Pittman from Cabarrus County. Representative Keith Kidwell is turning out to be from Eastern North Carolina, is turning out to be quite an asset to us as well. Our friends in the Senate are and by the way, Jeff McNeely out of Iredell County has also been extremely helpful in all of this. He actually introduced and we passed legislation to allow concealed carry in churches. Now, I say allow it in churches. Actually, firearms in churches are perfectly legal under North Carolina law, unless the church sponsors a school, in which case it becomes educational property where carrying a firearm is a felony, and most people don't know that. So we passed Senate Bill 43 was the final instrument for that, that would allow concealed handgun permit holders to carry in churches to protect them against the violent sociopaths that are increasingly targeting religious organizations and institutions. And so we passed that, and Governor Jim Crow, Governor Roy Cooper, vetoed that as well. So he's nothing if not consistent. Let's put it that way.
Those were exactly going to be my words. May not like him, but he's consistent in that regard, if not others. But is this the only latest law that you all have proposed that got vetoed? Is that submitted?
We've had about half a dozen bills in the hopper this time that we've asked the Second Amendment Working Group in the North Carolina House in particular to introduce, and they've introduced everything that was, we asked them to. These are the two that we were able to move. Now, of course, we're not done with these bills yet, especially House Bill 398. We're working very hard to override that veto right now. And so we are basically, matter of fact, today, our legislative action team, all volunteers, are distributing the op-eds and other information to Democrat legislators to induce them to vote to repeal this Jim Crow law, rather than standing mindlessly for what they claim is gun control. The interesting thing about all this, one of the Democrats we're putting a lot of pressure on, is, as I've mentioned, Senator Natasha Marcus. As it turns out, we found her propagating falsehoods during the Senate floor debate over House Bill 398. In fact, Senator Marcus said almost verbatim on the floor that we needed to keep the pistol purchase permit system because the sheriff's background checks were better than the FBI's NICS checks. All right. And to buttress this, she claimed to have data that, quote, more than 2,300 people who passed the FBI's computerized background check were denied permits by the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department because the sheriff's background checks were somehow superior to that being done by NICS. Well, we did a FOIA request from the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department and discovered that the 2,379 permits she claimed had passed NICS but failed the sheriff's background check. That's not true. That's false. In fact, the reality is that represented all of the permit denials, okay, for Mecklenburg County for an entire year, 2,379. So, we're kind of calling Senator Marcus out on her falsehood, and we're actually demanding disciplinary action against her for misleading her colleagues and her voters, particularly since this is not the first time she has done so. Apparently on another issue, the John Locke Foundation caught her in a lie on another bill. And so we're interested in making sure that true facts, actually honest information, is used to drive the debate over legislation, not the propaganda being false, being foisted on us by leftists like Senator Natasha Marcus. So we'll see how that works out. But I hope her Democrat colleagues are paying attention, because we will not allow false information to be used in the debate over this bill.
Have you all ever attempted to explain to the majority of African American citizens in this state why owning a self-defense weapon is good for them? there's most of the murders, not so much in North Carolina, but in other places. My God, black on black crime is the greatest of all.
Yeah.
They ought to know that there's that owning a gun is a good thing, and that legislators who oppose these reform measures that you have suggested are anti-black self-defense. How do they get away with that?
Unfortunately, as a white male, I am perhaps not the best spokesman for that. And so we're working on that, but I can't claim to have made major inroads. The people who have made good inroads on that are people like Colin Noir from the NRA, who is a very vocal advocate for African-American ownership of firearms for self-defense, and also Maj Toure, who I interviewed for my radio show a couple of years ago. And he is, I believe his organization is Black Guns Matter. And so I'm happy to say that one of the organizations that picked up on the Jim Crow origins of this law, I would like to say from our materials, I hope, is a gentleman, I believe it was Jim Phillips, writing for the African American Gun Association in the Washington Examiner, also repudiating and denouncing Governor Roy Cooper, Governor Jim Crow, and his veto of this Jim Crow pistol purchase permit law. So I'm happy to say that there are inroads being made here, and I think probably, if there's a silver lining to the unrest we've had over the last, couple of years, it's that a huge number of people are now buying firearms for self-protection, including a record number of African Americans who have now realized that the Second Amendment protects them as well as anybody else, and that they need to avail themselves of this protection.
You mentioned about the litigation that you've been engaged in. Do you have pro bono attorneys that are representing you, or are these fee attorneys?
I'll take pro bono work wherever I can get it, obviously. But the reality is that litigation is usually the avenue of last recourse for activists. The easiest and cheapest is economic action, like boycotts against companies. The next layer, if you will, that I recommend is legislative action, or political action, including legislative action and also election action. But and litigation is last, because quite frankly, it requires a lot of money, because it requires very specific expertise. And the other problem is that you sometimes can run into an activist judge, and no matter how strong your case is, they will rule against you anyways in judicial activism. For example, we years back repealed the ban on concealed carry at public events for which admission was charged, which included the state fair. And there was absolutely no legal basis after that for Steve Troxler to continue to post the state fair against handguns. We pointed this out to him. They refused to change the law. And with the state fair coming up very soon, we filed for an injunction and went to court. Well, Judge Donald Stevens, District Court Judge of Wake County, deliberately picked up the case in order to slam us. His decision said, and I quote, this is a near verbatim, "I don't think carrying firearms at the state fair is a good idea. And if I can find a way to interpret the law to prohibit it, I will." If that's not the definition of judicial activism, I don't know what is.
Oh, absolutely it is. And whether you're in a shopping mall or out in an open field, it doesn't matter. Self-defense is still self-defense. And what he's saying is he doesn't trust the law-abiding citizens that would go to events like that to
Mhm.
Use a firearm in a proper and lawful manner. How many times have people gone into malls and created mayhem, and all the people that are in there are absolutely defenseless?
I'm sorry to say that Judge Stevenson retired before we could go after him politically, but so
Yeah, he was an old guy. I'm glad to see him gone. Who replaced him?
I don't know at this point. I'd have to go back and check. Or Judge Stevens. I said Stevenson, it's Stevens. But anyways, so the bottom line is litigation is the measure of last recourse because it's never cheap.
But it's
The
never
good news
cheap,
is-
and the only ones that everybody says that in litigation, the only one that usually wins are the lawyers.
There's some of that. I'm happy to say, though, we do have good lawyers. We've also been working extensively with Gun Owners of America, which is a national organization I strongly recommend people support as well. And for example, the lawsuit against McFadden right now has jointly been filed by our council and Council for Gun Owners of America, and so we're paying our share. Don't get me wrong, but they have been of help to us in all this stuff. But if people want to support us, again, grnc.org, we can always use the help.
Absolutely. My goodness. Well, this, time flies whether you're having fun or not. I've had a really enjoyable time talking to you. Like to talk to you again. We're very big on personal freedoms, and there's so much going on today that where people where their freedoms are being taken away from them, and the most basic right of all is to protect one's own life. It's amazing. Well, thank you very much, Paul. It was very nice to talk to you, and I appreciate you coming on the show. We've got a total viewership of somewhere in the north of 50,000 people.
Excellent.
So we're going to be getting that out in the next day or two, and look forward to talking with you again. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, my friend. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.